What kind of man forces his dinner guest to watch as he executes a senator mid-banquet, then continues eating as if nothing happened? Who turns a wedding night into an imperial kidnapping just because he became obsessed with the bride? What kind of emperor proclaims himself a living god and threatens to place his own statue inside the holiest temple in Jerusalem? That man was Caligula, and all of this was done behind closed doors. From the outside, his power seemed absolute, but it was in the intimacy of his palace or aboard his private ships turned into temples of excess where Caligula revealed his true face, that of a ruler accountable to no one, not even the gods. His reign was brief, but so twisted that it still defies all logic today. To understand how he became this monster wearing a crown, we must go back to the beginning, because no one is born Caligula, one becomes him. Caligula was born Gaius Julius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus on August 31st, 12 AD in the city of Antium. He was the son of the celebrated general Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder, connecting him by blood to the two most powerful houses in the empire, the Julii and the Claudii. His lineage was marked by both glory and tragedy. From a young age, he accompanied his father on military campaigns. It was there that he received the nickname that would make him immortal, Caligula, meaning little boots. He wore a miniature armor that charmed the troops, but the sweetness of that nickname would brutally contrast with the future that awaited him. The death of his father in Syria, under suspicious circumstances, marked a turning point. Many believed he was assassinated by order of Sejanus, the feared Praetorian prefect, or even by the Emperor Tiberius himself. Agrippina, his mother, publicly accused the throne, and as a result, she was exiled and later eliminated. His elder brothers also met their deaths. Only Caligula was spared, perhaps for being too young or for learning to keep quiet. He was taken to Capri, where he lived under the direct surveillance of Tiberius. There, amidst decadent banquets and deadly political games, he learned a brutal truth. In Rome, the just do not survive. Only the cunning do. Years later, when Sejanus fell from grace and was executed, Caligula began his ascent. And when Tiberius died, some say with the help of a cushion over his face, the young heir became emperor. At first, he was greeted with jubilation. He freed prisoners, pardoned debts, and organized spectacles. It seemed Rome had found a new Augustus, a golden age had dawned. But soon after, he fell gravely ill. And when he reappeared in public, he was no longer the same. Something inside him had broken. What followed was not a government. It was a warning to history. When a man with deep traumas, absolute power, and profound insecurities believes himself to be a god, what happens ceases to be politics and becomes institutionalized madness. After recovering from his mysterious illness, Caligula did not return as the emperor the people had celebrated. He returned believing he was something more. He was now convinced that he was a living god, and he acted accordingly. It wasn't enough to rule. He demanded to be adored, feared, and venerated as if he were Jupiter incarnate. One of his first acts of self-deification was to order that the statues of the most revered gods be decapitated, to replace their heads with his own. This gesture, documented by Suetonius, was not just an act of unprecedented arrogance, it was a symbolic declaration of war on Roman religion itself. In two temples, he presented himself as a divinity in the flesh, appearing dressed in golden robes, crowns, and surrounded by incense and chants. But there was a limit that even the Romans knew shouldn't be crossed, the Temple of Jerusalem. Caligula ordered a statue of himself to be placed inside the holiest site in Judaism, a space where carved images were strictly forbidden. Outrage in Judea was immediate, and a revolt seemed inevitable. Only the intervention of Herod Agrippa I, a childhood friend of the emperor, managed to convince him to withdraw the order. It was an unusual exception in a sea of madness, and it narrowly avoided an open war in the East. Meanwhile, at the heart of the empire, his behavior grew more erratic. One of the most surreal episodes of his reign was the so-called War Against Neptune. During a campaign on the coast of Gaul, Caligula ordered his soldiers to form ranks facing the sea and attack the waves. With drawn swords, they were to combat the god of the ocean. When they finished, they were ordered to collect seashells, which Caligula presented as trophies of war. His obsession with divine power was intimately connected with his most human insecurities. Suetonius describes him as a man of sickly appearance, pale, with thin legs, a hairy neck, and bald from a young age. His eyes, sunken and dark, gave him an unsettling look. It was said that he flew into a rage when someone mentioned the word goat, a common insult regarding his appearance. His vanity was so extreme that, according to the Chronicles, he spent hours practicing threatening expressions in front of the mirror. He wanted his face to provoke fear, even without speaking. He wanted to look like a god, even if, deep down, he feared he was no more than a small man disguised as a monster. With Caligula, the line between spectacle and sadism completely disappeared. What was meant to be entertainment for the Roman people became a showcase of his absolute power, a stage where he displayed his darkest desires. He chose who would fight, who would die, and on occasion, who from the audience would be thrown into the arena. According to Suetonius, he wouldn't hesitate to point a finger at a guest he found boring or annoying and order them to be thrown into combat as punishment. Senators, nobles, common citizens, all were vulnerable to his whims. On one occasion, Caligula personally descended into the arena to face a gladiator named Mummius. When Mummius knelt to surrender, Caligula drew a real dagger and killed him in front of the entire crowd. He then paraded around the arena with his arms raised as if he had won a war. That was not a combat. It was a ritual execution to feed his ego and remind everyone that he decided who lived and who died. That same level of perversity was replicated at his parties. Caligula's banquets were a mixture of extreme luxury and absolute abuse. But at any moment, a smile from the emperor could turn into an order. The wife of a senator, a young maid, a drunken noble, anyone could be taken from the room and forced to fulfill his desires. Upon returning, Caligula would recount the details in front of everyone, laughing and humiliating his victims as if they were part of the menu. Even on the water, Caligula took excess to the extreme. He ordered the construction of 2 enormous palace ships on Lake Nemi. These ships were covered in marble, with gardens, columns, thermal baths, and halls dedicated to private orgies. They were floating sanctuaries of excess. If Caligula feared anything more than losing power, it was not being remembered as someone superior. That's why he not only crushed his enemies, but also sought to ridicule the most sacred institutions of Rome, especially the Senate. But nothing was as symbolically insulting as his famous horse, Incitatus. Caligula didn't just build him a marble stable with jewel-encrusted collars. He also announced in all seriousness that he would appoint him a consul. This was a direct provocation, a way of saying that the Senate was so useless that even a horse could take its place. His disdain for norms was also reflected in his intimate life. The most scandalous rumor was his alleged incestuous relationship with his sister Drusilla. Many believed he loved her as a wife and even dedicated divine honors to her after her death. Added to this, he sometimes dressed as a woman, at other times as Eastern gods, or even as Venus. Caligula didn't want to resemble the gods. He wanted to replace them. But even fear could not sustain a regime forever. 4 years after taking power, in 41 AD, a group of praetorians led by Cassius Chaerea brutally assassinated him in a palace hallway. They also killed his wife and daughter, fearing there might be heirs. The Senate attempted to restore the Republic, but the praetorians had already proclaimed Claudius as the new emperor. Caligula was dead, but his legend was not. Today, his name remains synonymous with imperial madness, limitless abuse, and a reign that brought the Roman Empire to the brink of institutional collapse. Beyond the myth, one thing remains clear. Absolute power in the hands of an unstable man can turn an empire into his personal stage of terror.